Greetings everyone, welcome to video number 12 in the project management series presented by Process Geekoid. Today's agenda will be going over reviewing the PMBOK processes from last time, as well as the ninth process, which is the defined scope process. This process occurs at the intersection of the scope knowledge area and the planning process group. As always, please subscribe, like, and comment, so let's move forward. After collecting requirements from relevant stakeholders, it is now time to define the scope of the project. The purpose of this process is to set the boundaries of the product, service, or result in regards to which requirements are considered in scope and out of scope for the current project or phase. Similar to collect requirements process, which we just talked about earlier, defined scope process is a critical element of the project and must be very thorough with clear understanding from the business and IT sides of the house. Once the scope is finally agreed upon by both sides and signed off from all relevant stakeholders, this is the point of no return for major changes. If change requests occur after this, then that means the issues are going to rise, and this can contribute to risks such as schedule delays, overstepping the budget, overworking the project team's resources, and not meeting the voice of the customer requirements, resulting in customer dissatisfaction. Now let's discuss what two possible sources of risks could be coming from. So if we were to overstep the budget, schedule delays, overworking project team resources, the root cause of this is usually coming from scope creep or gold plating. Scope creep is externally driven by customers who constantly add new features during a validation session or final sign-off. On the other hand, gold plating is internally driven by the project team, such as software engineers, analysts, program managers, and other relevant stakeholders who would add nice-to-have features on top of the mandatory requirements, resulting in a situation where the team bites off more than it can chew or deliver for the project. The key point here is that the scope must be crystal clear with no ambiguity from the get-go, otherwise a lot of impediments will pop up during the execution phase of the project. Now the ITTOs, inputs, tools, and techniques for defined scope process are shown here. The process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. That's what we're trying to do here. So for inputs, we have scope management plan, which comes from plan scope management, project charter, which comes from develop project charter, requirements documentation, which comes from collect requirements process. Then we have organizational process assets, which will guide us in how we will define scope based on policies and procedures, and even lessons learned from previous projects. For tools and techniques, we have expert judgment, product analysis, where we are basically going and analyzing the product to get better ideas as to what customers are looking for. So in the case of automobile industry, we would have users, customers, designers who would basically look at the existing product and try to find new requirements to enhance the current product. In the case of the cell phone industry, we would have Apple or Android from Google basically go and look at the existing phone that they have, the iPhone or Google Android phones, and take a look at the current state and try to predict the future state by adding features and add on to that to the product scope. So that's what product analysis is. Then you have alternatives generation, which is basically looking at other ways of delivering the product, service, or result, finding a better, effective way of defining the scope. There could be many ways to look at it. We're trying to pick the right one. Then you have facilitated workshops, which can come in two flavors. One is JAD, actually three flavors: JAD, QFD, and voice of the customer. So JAD, joint application development, where we have a facilitated group technique where SMEs, developers, testers, and a project manager develop, test, and document a small piece of a feature or system. QFD, quality function deployment, contrary to the JAD technique. In this method, a feature or a function is developed and deployed so that the users may discover it and use it. The voice of the customer is basically such as in the case of auto shows where potential customer voice out their potential requirements they would like to see in a new car for an auto product refinement project, or in the case of the cell phone industry, in the case of Apple, for example, or Android, Google, you would have users and user application groups and developers who would come together and try to come up with new requirements to enhance customer usage. So those are ways that we will be defining the scope, what the customer wants. Then we have expert judgment, where you have PMO, Project Management Office, peer project managers, and also other types of expert judgment from existing policies, procedures, historical documents that can guide you in defining the scope. And then you have alternatives generation, which is basically a alternative way of basically defining the scope and getting the same result. And product analysis, as we just talked about, using facilitated workshops, we can analyze the current product for enhancements. So in the case of the iPhone or Google Android phones, or even computers for that fact, you look at the current as-is state and try to come up with requirements to enhance the current features. So, for example, in the auto industry, if you had Toyota, they would look at their current vehicle. Let's say it's a Toyota Highlander and it doesn't have a backup camera, and the older model didn't have it, then you'd add that on to the current model. If it was a phone, you'd like to add more applications to it, then you could add a screen app sharing site or another app for recording voices or altering audio files, etc. Like there could be many requirements. So those are some examples of getting customer requirements into the defined scope. Now, the other types of, so out of all these are all the tools. Now we have the outputs. Scope statement. This has 8 main components. Description objectives, cost, which is coming from the cost baseline, time, which includes the schedule baseline, assumptions, what we assume to happen during a project when we are doing the project itself. We are assuming that all databases are up and running, all software, all systems are up and running. We don't have any major blackout periods. We have all available resources. No one is going to be sick, etc. So those are assumptions. Risks are things that we are uncertain that it will happen. We don't even know it's going to happen, but we plan for it in risk planning. So a certain risk could be, for example, if the database does go out, what do? We're going to have a mitigation plan in the risk management plan to ensure that the risk is taken care of. Constraints are things that are going to prevent us and hinder us from moving forward. And major deliverables are basically what we are delivering in terms of the product, service, or result for the project itself. Acceptance criteria explains criteria that the project manager and project team will use to accept the project, product, service, or result for the project. So what is considered in scope and out of scope is the essence of the scope statement. So product scope mentions the features, functions that characterize a product functionality, and this is usually defined first. Then you have project scope, which is defined after the product scope, which includes all work performed to deliver product, scope, service, or result. Then for the other outputs, we have project document updates. This includes updates to stakeholder register, requirements documentation in case requirements have been added or deleted, and a requirements traceability matrix to tie each requirement to the appropriate deliverable and deliverable owner. So the project is successful in that regard. So that's really important that the scope is defined clearly and make sure that both sides of the house, IT and business, understand what boundaries they're playing around with in the project itself, and that what we are delivering is clearly articulated in this planning phase before moving forward. So keep that in mind, that scope is very clearly defined If it's not defined, you're going to hit roadblocks down the road. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please subscribe, like, and comment. I look forward to helping you out. Thank you.